Hello, Georgia HOSA officers. Welcome to our workshop. Thank you so much for joining us wherever you are around the state. We are so excited for you to join me and Sriya's workshop, HOSA and Beyond, a voice for all. And here's a little glimpse of what we'll be covering today. We'll be placing advocacy in the context of your own HOSA chapter and then expanding it beyond your HOSA chapter as we look towards how advocacy can be placed within the healthcare field. And a little introduction about me. I am Fabricio Penademoni, the Vice President of Membership for Georgia HOSA. And I'm not going to read all of this aloud. It's just there if you want to read it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sriya Serhireddy, your state president-elect. And we also have an icebreaker for you all. We highly encourage you to use this with your chapter officer team to ensure that you know how to approach any situation. With this icebreaker, you do have a specific situation at hand here. A first-year HOSA member is confused about what HOSA has to offer in terms of competitive events. Now we want you all to split into groups and pick an approach and talk about how you can defend your member in this situation.
And this is a quote from the Student Leadership Challenge, which we, the state officer team, have been reading. And it basically discusses how a leader is somebody who has dynamic qualities, and this allows them to truly be an effective leader. And what this quote is saying is that as a chapter officer, you can't expect to lead your chapter effectively if you don't listen to your members and their ideas and suggestions in order to challenge the process effectively. Simply asserting your own ideas won't lead to innovation within your chapter. And we encourage you all to use a be your own follower type of mindset, which encourages you to ground yourself and not necessarily see yourself as different from other members. All of this is to say that we should keep in mind that the members are the backbone of your chapter, and we should think of ways to represent their voices as often as we can.
So this next part of the workshop will help you all distinguish when it is time to serve as an advocate in your role as a chapter officer and when you might need to positively utilize your position of authority. Before you move on to the next slide, try to think of your own definition of both the word advocacy and authority.
So as you can see, these are clearly two very different terms. Advocacy is focused on listening to a member and then acting on that listening by doing whatever was suggested or asked of you, while authority requires a more direct, one-sided approach. Authority does have a stigma around it, as people often associate it with a dictator approach, but we do want to note, however, that authority may be useful in certain situations. So say you have a friend from your school at SLC that has a competitive event coming up and they didn't study for it. They're panicking and they come up to you for help. So what do? An authoritative approach would come in handy in this situation since they need someone who isn't just going to listen like an advocate might. So these are clearly two very different approaches, but advocate authority may be the best approach to take in some situations.
As a chapter officer, you want to make sure that throughout the HOSA year, you're letting your members know that their voices are heard. And as an officer, you also want to make sure that you have a balanced approach to your officership. And with that, you need to be able to develop the mentality that you are not above your members in any way. As the graphic suggests, you can see that officers and members contribute equal amounts to their successful HOSA chapters. And at the end of the day, a good officer-member relationship is one that allows for listening to occur on behalf of the officer and for curiosity to develop on part of the member.
And speaking of listening, we're going to talk about two kinds of listening, what exactly they entail, and some physical signs that somebody may be using that kind of listening style. So first, there is active listening. And the biggest thing that we want you all to take away from this type of listening style is that you're actually letting your member know that you understand the information. And some ways to do this are by nodding and making eye contact, because this lets members know that you are approachable and that they can come to you for whatever they need.
So, on the other hand, passive listening is when you give off the impression that you are not ready to listen to your member. Not only your members, you're not ready to listen to anyone if you are passively listening. In passive listening, you are probably not using any sort of nonverbal cues. You're not nodding, you're not using eye contact, and this gives off the impression that you're not absorbing any information. And now that you know the striking difference between the two types of listening, take some time to think about which type of listening you should utilize as a chapter officer and eventually as a healthcare professional. And now that you have this baseline understanding of what advocacy truly means and its connection to listening, we're going to put advocacy in the context of your own HOSA chapters. These are very broad categories in which you might need to advocate for your members. Chapter meetings, conferences, chapter initiated events like fundraisers, and of course, one-on-one communication. Personally, I had the chance to serve as an advocate in my local chapter when I was given the opportunity to serve as reporter. As reporter, it was my responsibility to make sure that important information was shared in a timely manner and that I took the members' concerns and questions to my officer team and eventually to the advisors if need be. This role truly taught me the importance of listening before you act. And it's something that I take into my role as a state officer today and will take into my role as an aspiring healthcare professional.
For me, my moment of advocacy was suggesting as an officer team that we do a fundraiser to help alleviate the cost of SLC for all of our members because we didn't want them to feel a financial strain and have that be the reason they couldn't go to SLC. So it was important that we advocate for our members even though no one specifically asked for help.
In both of our instances, we were given a chance to prioritize advocacy in our local chapters. A couple ways that you all can do the same include saving time for questions. You might think that this is a very easy thing to do, but it's also very easy to conclude your chapter meeting without ever actually speaking to a member in a one-on-one conversation. So, when you start off your HOSA year and you have your first chapter meeting, make sure to delegate at least 5 to 10 minutes for your members to approach you, ask their questions, and build relationships with the people who are leading their chapter. You can also form focus groups. This is a lesser known initiative, but of course, it's just as impactful. The idea behind focus groups is that you would elect 2 to 3 representatives per grade. These are people that you know are unbiased and will represent the concerns, questions, and ideas of their grade, not just their friend group. This initiative also takes into account leadership development. It allows your members to have a taste of what it's like to be an officer before they ever even apply, so that when they are given the chance to serve as an officer, they'll know exactly what to prioritize, and that is to advocate for their members.
Another not so common chapter initiative is utilizing parliamentary procedure. And a basic overview of this includes creating an agenda to stay organized, assigning a secretary to keep track of minutes during meetings, and probably the most important one is giving everybody a chance to talk before any big decisions are made. And this is really important because members may be hesitant to come up to you before meetings or during meetings. So if you set aside that time, not only are members more likely to come up to you, but it also helps to make sure that your decisions are representative of how the entire chapter feels. And lastly, making yourself accessible. So setting up a communication platform for your chapter, such as Slack, GroupMe, or Remind, will allow your members to reach you efficiently. And this lets them know that you're available and willing to answer any and all questions, not just during your meetings, but throughout the entire HOSA year.
Now that you're aware of advocacy and how it tailors into your role as a chapter officer, we're going to put things into perspective by thinking of advocacy in your role as a healthcare professional. To start us off, we have an activity for you all, and we highly encourage you all to work with your chapter officer team during this activity. The idea behind the activity is that you would choose a partner. Once you have your partner, you'll take turns serving as the officer and as the member. Once you've decided upon your role, make sure to choose an issue on the chart. Once you've chosen your issue, go ahead and fill out the entire chart as you would in your roles. For example, if you have chosen issue A, where your member has forgotten to submit their forms for SLC, as an officer, you're going to approach your member, fill out the top portions, and work through the activity as is. Here are a couple terms to help you all out during the activity. Your solution team. These are the people that are going to help you solve this issue. Once again, if you chose issue A, in this situation, I would personally contact the president and eventually the advisor. These are the people that are going to help me, once again, solve this issue. Member information. These are important notes to take when defending your member. Think, what's some information that I should know before I begin to advocate for my member? Once again, in the situation where the member has forgotten their forms, maybe this member is a senior, they got senioritis, and they forgot to submit their forms. They've never done this before, and they're a very diligent member. So make sure to take note of that information so that you can present it to your president and your advisor to let this member have a chance to go to SLC. The planning box, very simple. This is where you flesh out your plan for your member. And finally, the follow-up box. This is arguably the most crucial portion of the entire chart. It's where you decide if you have an answer for your member up front, or if you're going to take some time, circle back, and give them an answer later using their contact information.
And next, we have a video for you all that applies advocacy into the healthcare field. So you can play this on your own if you'd like. It's only about a minute long. But the most things that we want to highlight from this video is about advocacy. And first, there's a more obvious instance of the nurse who advocated for her patient by insisting that the sponge count was off. But also, there's a surgeon who did not listen to the nurse, meaning that he wasn't being the proper leader in this situation, considering his position in the OR. Had he been a true advocate, he would have actively listened and recounted the sponges, which would have ultimately saved the life of his patient in the OR. So clearly, advocacy can even become a matter of life and death in the healthcare field. So it's never too early to practice advocacy within your own chapter.
Now that you've completed the activity and that you've watched the video, we hope that you all understand that advocacy is not an experience that is exclusive to HOSA. Sure, as an officer, you will have to serve as an advocate, but make sure to note that learning how to serve as an advocate now will only help you out in the future, so that one day, similar to the nurse, you all can serve as patient advocates.
And now that you've learned more about advocacy and enhanced those advocate skills, we're going to take some time to debrief and answer a couple of questions to reflect on what you've learned. So if you'd like, write one of these questions or more down and pause the video, take some time to answer them, and again, reflect on what you've learned today.
Also, make sure to think about which takeaway you have from this workshop. We hope that this workshop ultimately taught you all the importance of advocacy not only as a chapter officer, but also as a future healthcare professional.
And the last thing we'd like to leave you all with is this quote. A good leader is one that does just their job. A great leader is one that consults their followers before deciding what their job is. I know it may seem tempting or even like the right thing to do at times to have your chapter run just the way you envision it. But we have to remember that your members also have a vision for your chapter, and it's your responsibility as an officer to represent those visions by using your own position of leadership, which is exactly what advocacy is all about.
Now that we have preached advocacy to the max, it's our turn to serve as your advocates. These serve as our essential pieces of contact information. So if you have any questions or need help throughout the HOSA year, make sure to contact us using our emails and our Instagram handles.
And also join our Georgia HOSA Slack. This is the best method for us to communicate with all the officers and the members alike throughout the entire HOSA year. And it is our new tool. So make sure you're joining the Slack and including this slide, which you will have access to throughout the entire year in your own presentations. So share those with your chapters.
We have also developed our very own card link. This truly is your one-stop shop for all things Georgia HOSA. We know that sometimes it can be overwhelming with the amount of links you have to use throughout the HOSA year, but please know that if you share this card link and the Slack link with your chapter, everyone can stay updated on all things Georgia HOSA and, of course, have a successful HOSA year. We would also like to emphasize that we are ready for chapter visits. So if your chapter is interested in having a state officer visit during a chapter meeting or any other chapter initiated event, we are more than ready to do so. Please include the date, time, your school, the event or occasion, and of course, which officers you would like to attend. Once again, thank you all so much for virtually attending Officer Jumpstart, and we hope that you all gained essential knowledge that you can use throughout your officership.
We hope that the next school year is a much smoother year for your chapters, and thank you so much for coming to Officer Jumpstart.